You and I remember an age, an era in which there were signs on doors of restaurants and hotels and public places, or I should say actually private places, that said people without shoes or shirts, etc., would not be admitted. Well, these days, in this very casual society of ours, Southern California, people can come in basically in whatever they want and be served because that's the way we've evolved for good and for ill. I think both. I think what we wear, by the way, makes a difference to how we carry ourselves and how we impact one another. I also think about environmentalism in that way, this kind of personal environmentalism, the way that we affect the environment around us, the way that we pollute the environment around us. And I don't mean necessarily with our nakedness, but with that too. I also mean with the kinds of things that we're willing to post and write on ourselves and online. I remember taking my daughter to Barnes and Noble in Westlake when she was probably a preteen, and she's an avid reader, voracious reader, and even in those days she was. And I said the best date was I'd take her to dinner, and Hannah and I would then wander around Barnes and Noble and maybe get a book or two. And as we were coming from the upstairs area, fiction down to nonfiction, on the escalator, there was a boy who looked around 13 or 14, sitting in one of the armchairs that used to be just next to the escalator. And he had a black hat on with the fully spelled out words "F-U" on the hat. And I nearly did a spin on the escalator. I thought I was going to do somersaults going down it. Certainly not in joy, but in shock at that kind of air pollution that my little girl and the old woman behind me and everybody else in that little part of society had to be exposed to that person's pollution. But also, what shocked me was it wasn't on an adult who'd made the decision to wear what he wore, but it was on a child who presumably had a parent who allowed him to go out of the house or even drove him wearing that hat. And then you got to ask yourself as well, what's the motivation to say that to strangers through the clothes that you wear? Well, all of this is to say that we have rules in our minds and we have rules in society for what we admit in and what we don't admit in. And you and I all have that. We are the governors of the doorways. Well, sometimes when it comes to the ethereal, not the physical, not the person coming in and what they are or aren't bringing with them, sometimes when it comes to the thoughts, we're not as vigilant. Or we might be aware that something came in, we opened the door to it, and now we have to live with it. I think there are two ways to think about that. One is that negative thoughts and worries and fears can come in, and either we have to do as some people say we should do, which is block them at the door, say, you are not admitted into my mind. I'm not going to give you entry, access to me. That's one way of approaching it. And the other, I should say, not but, is to say, I'm not going to spend my life fighting the invisible. I'm not going to let myself constantly be in battle at the doorway, that kind of hypervigilant, that kind of rigidity. Instead, I'm going to decide what I do once you are in my mind, and then how I frame or reframe your existence, your presence, negative thought. And then I'm going to usher you to the door again and let you go. So you can think about that two ways. Ask yourself right now about the thoughts that are entering your mind even as I speak. Which ones of them belong and are welcome, and which ones you need to either shove at the door, push them out, repost the sign that says you are not admitted, if that serves you well. Or if you take another approach, which is to say, I'm going to embrace even that, even the clouds in the sky. Instead of wishing them away or pushing them out of my eyesight, my vision, I'm going to embrace them, accept that they're a part of what comes into the guest house that is my mind, and then I'm going to make sure it's a temporary stay and let them go. Maybe that'll help you in the middle of the night or in the day. With that in mind, I found a beautiful, beautiful Rumi poem that I want to read to you. And maybe this will be helpful as your day progresses and certainly as the next night approaches. It's called The Guest House by Rumi. It begins this way. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some moment momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. There's your inspiration. I hope it's helpful.